The Freethinkers of the Year award is my favorite time at the convention because this is when we recognize state church litigants, usually successful, but they should all be won. But in this case, we have 3 members and a 4th who could not be here today who made possible winning lawsuits. Could we have that back door closed, please? The one that over there. Only that one's to be, yeah, thank you, that'll make it quieter. So our first Freethinker of the Year was Ishmael Jaffrey, who won a Supreme Court case in, I think it was 1985. And we have had many, many wonderful Freethinkers of the Year. And without their help, without their feet on the ground, their willingness to speak up, we cannot cure many of these Establishment Clause violations. So we are going to introduce to you the Freethinkers of the Year, and it's very special to me that the staff attorneys who have worked closely with them will be able to introduce them one at a time. So I'm going to call up Attorney Sam Grover.
Right. So yeah, just to echo Rebecca from earlier, we're up to 7 full-time staff attorneys and 2 full-time legal fellows at FFRF, which is amazing. I've been telling people all weekend that over the last 8 years, we've added 1 attorney per year, and we haven't hit that sweet spot yet where adding an attorney reduces the amount of work that any of us has to do. So that's pretty incredible growth for a nonprofit, and so thanks to all of you for making that possible. We couldn't do it without our membership support. Yeah, give yourselves a hand, please. Now, in order to keep all of those attorneys from stepping on each other's toes, between the 9 of us, we've divided the country into regions, usually based on the federal circuits. And I'm the lucky guy who gets to deal with Texas, Louisiana, and Mississippi, which there's some very interesting stuff coming out of there, mostly from Texas, because we have a lot of members from Texas, and there are a lot of violations there. So those 2 things combined give me a lot of work to handle. And as a result, I spend much of my time messing with Texas. Oh, good. That's a Dan Barker joke, so you can send your comments to him. So in recent years, there's been a trend, mostly in the southern states, of placing "In God We Trust" decals on the back of police vehicles. And that's something we've seen all over the place, but it's the national motto, and it makes for a tough legal challenge. The courts seem to buy into this idea that it's secular in some sense, which we don't agree with. But from our standpoint, it's better to try to educate sheriffs on why they should try to be more inclusive than it is to sue. But in some special cases, sheriffs have gone beyond "In God We Trust" on the back of vehicles. That phrase, for instance, was not explicitly religious enough for Sheriff Ronnie Dodson out of Brewster County, Texas. He got the bright idea to go one step further and put a Christian cross on the back of a bunch of his patrol vehicles. He added this, it's an 8-inch cross decal in black with a thin blue line. Get it? He put it on the back of 6 patrol vehicles in December of 2015. And at the time, he told media that he did it because he, quote, wanted God's protection over his deputies. So we learned about the crosses pretty quickly, and so a few days before Christmas, we sent a letter of complaint to the sheriff explaining why the crosses needed to come down. Now, Sheriff Dodson, he didn't like our letter, and neither, as it turns out, did Governor Greg Abbott, who filed a brief with the state attorney general's office insisting that the display of Latin crosses on government property did not violate the Establishment Clause. Yeah, imagine that. Thanks for clearing that up for us, Greg Abbott. So ignoring the governor's nonsense FFRF, with me and fellow attorney Patrick Elliott serving as co-counsel, sued Sheriff Dodson and Brewster County 3 months later in March of 2016 to get the crosses removed. Of course, the only reason we were able to sue at all or so quickly was thanks to the assistance of two brave local members, Kevin Price and Jesse Castillo, who served as the local plaintiffs essential to the survival of our lawsuit. And that's why I'm telling you this story now, because it took courage and conviction to do what Kevin and Jesse did. They live in Brewster County and were willing to be named plaintiffs in the lawsuit challenging this aggressive religious endorsement by the community's Christian majority. And it took even more courage to sue the Brewster County Sheriff when both Kevin and Jesse were active within the law enforcement community in Brewster County. Yeah. And yet, both Kevin and Jesse answered this call. So what happened with the lawsuit? Shortly after we filed, the Brewster County Sheriff's Office took down the crosses. The county agreed through a legally binding consent decree not to place cross decals on Sheriff's Office vehicles in the future. They also agreed to pay Kevin and Jesse $1 each in nominal damages, which is a symbolic acknowledgement of past constitutional violations against them, as well as paying $22,370 in attorney's fees and court costs. So in short, we won swiftly. Yeah. So I actually have two Freethinker of the Year awards to hand out right now, and the first goes to Kevin Price, who could not be here today. A few months ago, Kevin moved to northern Syria in order to serve under the US-supported YPG, which is a mainly Kurdish peacekeeping force with foreign volunteer support that has been fighting ISIS in the region. Kevin wishes he could be here to accept his Freethinker of the Year award, and he wrote to me right before this to say that he sees our legal victory over Brewster County as essential in keeping law enforcement agencies in check. He writes, quote, "I think FFRF's swift action was a good criticism for Brewster County Sheriff's Office to hear, as a lot of law enforcement types won't criticize themselves. FFRF's action served to educate them and other locals that nationalizing religion in any way won't be tolerated." So, for Kevin's part in blowing the whistle on the Brewster County Sheriff's crosses and for educating the county on the necessity of the Establishment Clause, please give him a brief round of applause. We'll be sending him his award and all of your well wishes. And so that brings me to our second awardee. Jesse Castillo was born in Spain during his father's military service and grew up in Panama, New Mexico, Louisiana, and Florida. And then in the early 1990s, he served in the US Army, graduating from Army Ranger School. After serving in the military, Jesse earned an associate's degree from Miami-Dade College and later moved to Brewster County, Texas, where he took a job in law enforcement and befriended Kevin Price, contacted FFRF, and decided to take an emphatic public stand against government promotion of religion. Yeah. So I'm going to leave it at that because Jesse is here today, and I want to give him time to speak about his experiences as a freethinker. So thank you, Jesse, for standing up for the First Amendment and making possible this important legal victory. You are certainly deserving of the title Freethinker of the Year. Congratulations, man. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. So like he said, this is another case out of Texas. I'm really glad the Freedom from Religion Foundation has no problem messing with Texas. I'm not originally from Texas. My wife and I moved to Alpine, Texas back in 2007, along with our 3 boys. Alpine is in Brewster County, which happens to be the largest county in the state of Texas. However, its population is only about 9,000 people in the entire county, and about 6,000 of that 9,000 live in our small town of Alpine. A little more than a year and a half ago, Christian crosses began appearing on our local sheriff's police vehicles. The crosses were basically large stickers, as Sam pointed out, that were in the shape of Christian crosses, and they were placed on the back windows of some of the police vehicles. The crosses also featured that thin blue line he mentioned, representing support for law enforcement. Not all of the police vehicles from the Brewster County Sheriff's Office had these Christian crosses on them. And the sheriff himself, Ronnie Dodson, didn't actually order his deputies to place these crosses on the vehicles. He just allowed his deputies, to place the crosses if they wanted to, and many of them did just that. Our county sheriff, as he mentioned, told one of our local newspapers that allowing the crosses to be displayed in this manner was his way of showing his support for his deputies. Those Christian crosses that were being used back then are still being sold in a small print shop in our town, and our lawsuit actually led to the boosting of sales of those crosses. And the crosses are currently displayed on many private vehicles in Alpine. But of course, we weren't trying to stop people from placing crosses on their personal vehicles. During that time they were displaying crosses, there was some online debate on the Sheriff's Department's Facebook page. And there was one particular post that was very popular. It had thousands of likes, and it was highly shared. And this particular Facebook post stated, "Dodson wanted God's protection over his deputies, and the thin blue line on the crosses stands for law enforcement." So it was a belief among some Christians that just the mere presence of a cross could help protect law enforcement officers. Well, as an atheist and as a U.S. Border Patrol agent, I can think of real ways for increasing the safety of our police officers. Better training and better equipment would be much more effective than relying on a cross for protection. This is just another example of some of the absurd beliefs held by religious people. To many people, the displaying of Christian crosses on police vehicles is not a big deal. I even have friends and family members that seem to think it's not that big of a deal, and they definitely don't think that something like this is important enough to sue over. Well, it is. It is worth taking action to try and stop violations like this to prevent bigger problems down the road. Crosses on government property obviously go against our nation's principle of the separation of church and state. And for our county, it was basically saying our sheriff's department knows which is the one true correct religion, and if you believe in that religion too, then you're on the right side. It was very divisive. Of course, the Christian cross itself can mean many different things to different people, but as many of us know, the teachings in Christianity represented by that cross are not always good. The teachings are false, many are just downright horrible and even dangerous. When our local police were displaying these crosses, it made myself and others wonder if our sheriff's deputies were going to be fair and impartial to a public that includes people of different faiths and people like myself who identify as atheist. I wasn't always non-religious. I grew up going to Christian churches, and I was actually very enthusiastic about Christianity at an early age. But shortly after reaching adulthood and entering the U.S. Army many years ago, I had already seen too many inconsistencies in churches and inconsistencies in what I was reading in the Bible, and I could no longer call myself a Christian. I still believed in a God, and I had a strong fear of burning in hell, which kept me tormented for many years and kept me believing in God longer than I should have. But through the years of analyzing my own beliefs about spirituality and about reality, I moved closer and closer to becoming an atheist. Before I had ever met an open atheist, I basically believed that a religious person would be a more moral person, and an atheist would be a person that was more prone to engaging in immoral behavior. But the first open atheist I ever got to know on a personal level happened to be a person with good moral character, had good work ethic, and had a good sense of humor. He was someone that I admired and even looked up to. Having known this atheist and many other atheists helped to break down my misconceptions about what it means to be an atheist and also what it doesn't mean to be an atheist. So I think it really helps when religious people get exposed to atheists who are open about their religious views, and I especially think it's helpful when they get to know an atheist on a personal level. It's important for atheists not to shy away from religious discussions. I recently had an atheist friend tell me that he doesn't ever like to engage in religious discussions with people because he says, you're never going to change their minds anyway. And it may be true that you will never get a religious person to completely reject his religion, but I know from experience that you can get them to question their own beliefs, and over time, they can change their stance on religion. And of course, there are more effective ways at discussing religion with religious people, and there are times and places where discussing religion may be inappropriate. It is very important for government to stay out of religion so that people can be more comfortable expressing their own public or religious views publicly. I would hate to think that if we hadn't sued our county and allowed them to promote Christianity in that way, that it would have led to some closeted atheists to decide to remain closeted. I happen to know a few closeted atheists in Alpine, and I know two that have come out recently. People should feel free to discuss religion without our government telling us which religion they think is the correct one. I actually enjoy it when Mormons and Jehovah's Witnesses come knocking at my door. It gives me a chance to share my views and ask them questions too. As an atheist, I also have good news to share. Another problem with having a sheriff's department displaying Christian crosses has to do with the potential for profiling. I've never heard of a case of police profiling against an atheist before, but since some Christians already think atheists are just bad people and somehow morally bankrupt, I wouldn't put it past a religious fundamentalist with crazy ideas who happens to be a police officer to begin feeling emboldened, especially when their department's giving them a wink and a nod. I just think that mixing law enforcement with religion is a really bad idea. I have not faced any backlash over this lawsuit, and I just want to mention that Sheriff Dodson's family are actually really good people. I've known his son for many years and worked with him in the past, and the sheriff's wife is actually an outstanding veterinarian who takes care of not only my pets, but my co-plaintiff's pets, took care of them for many years. They've been good to me before the lawsuit, and they continue to be friendly towards me after the lawsuit. Like I said, our town is a really small town. Most people I have met there are really good people. I just think they made a bad decision. I'm glad we were there to correct it. I really want to thank the Freedom from Religion Foundation and the two outstanding attorneys that were involved in this case, Sam Grover and Randall Callanan. I also want to thank my good friend and former coworker, Kevin Price, who couldn't be here today. Thank you.
All right, so I'm Ryan Jayne. I'm a staff attorney with FFRF. I've been a legal fellow for a couple years, and I'm the most recent staff attorney. Happy to introduce Jerry Bloom, the next Freethinker of the Year recipient. When I became an FFRF legal fellow in the fall of 2015, I did not expect to immediately be handed my first federal lawsuit to handle, but that's what ended up happening. It started when Jerry, an FFRF member from Shelton, Connecticut, reached out to us in November of 2015 when he became aware of that the city of Shelton, Connecticut had allowed the American Legion to put a religious angel display up every December in a city park that's called Constitution Park. How's that for irony? So Jerry applied for a permit to put up FFRF's Winter Solstice display in Constitution Park, which, among other things, the display states that there are no angels. And guess what? We were denied. The city said, no, we think that many will find that display offensive, so you may not put it up. So Jerry readily agreed to be the lead plaintiff in a federal lawsuit, which was FFRF and Jerome H. Bloom versus the city of Shelton, Connecticut. This was a federal lawsuit filed in March of 2016. Liz Cavell was the head attorney on the case, and I served as co-counsel. As a result of the lawsuit, during the holiday season this past year, the city permanently agreed to stop hosting any Angels display or any other display in Constitution Park, and they also promised that FFRF would be able to put up its own display in any form that the city does put up. So the city also reimbursed FFRF for our court costs. So overall, the lawsuit was a complete victory. In addition to being a staunch state church activist, Jerry is a retired RN. He's a U.S. Army veteran. He has a wide range of interests, including art, urban archaeology, paleontology, stargazing, bird watching, and chess. He actually beat me at a chess game yesterday and has agreed to give me a rematch over lunch today. So on behalf of FFRF, I am delighted to name you, Jerry Bloom, as a Freethinker of the Year.
Okay. Well, thank you, everyone. Where to start? I, like you all, am an atheist. However, I would like to give religion its due. The greatest art mankind has ever produced has been inspired by religion. Where would the world be without the Sistine Chapel? David, the Pieta, Cellini's Ecstasy of St. Teresa, Beethoven's Ode to Joy, Handel's Messiah. These are things we can all relate to and understand and recognize as beautiful. I'm not going to go into the other half of what religion has done. I'd like to give you all a short history lesson. On All Saints' Day in 1755, a natural disaster enabled us to become what we are today. On that date, an enormous earthquake struck in the Atlantic Ocean. It leveled the city of Lisbon, Portugal. It rang church bells in Paris. It was felt in Moscow. Bays drained in Norway. A 50-foot tidal wave struck soon afterwards, killing thousands. This was 9:30 in the morning as the city of Lisbon's populace was going to church. The King of Portugal, amongst the other monarchs of the continent, were very upset, to say the least, and the King of Portugal appointed an aristocrat, I don't recall his name, to manage the disaster. And he essentially told the king who asked, "What shall we do?" And he told him, "Bury the dead and clean up the debris," which seems pretty logical to avoid outbreak of disease. And people were very fraught. How could God do this to us on All Saints' Day? Essentially what that did is usher in the era of enlightenment, where people actually questioned the existence of a benevolent, all-loving God. Unfortunately, religion survived the age of enlightenment. So here we are today. Okay. All right. So, what's there to add? Ryan summed up the case pretty succinctly. Oh, by the way, I'm suing Shelton again. Yeah. For years now, they have had a God bless Shelton police sign on the lawn of their police department, flanked by American flags. I approached Mayor Laurie again and asked him to remove it, and he refused. I made an appointment with the police chief, which he was a no-show on. So they really leave me no alternative. I'll be filing the summonses next week when I get home. Okay, so there's approximately 1 billion of us atheists in the world. There are 7 billion people in the world. How does 1/7 convince the 6/7 that they are wrong? Mass marketing. Okay. I mean, it's going to take more than placards and billboards. We should have like the weekly, as opposed to evangelical hour, the weekly atheist hour out there on the air. Also, I learned that although religion is a mind-altering thing, the Food and Drug Administration does not consider it a drug. I went down and I asked. They were very upset about that question. However, I suggest that it be limited to those of the age of consent, or at least with the cognitive capacity to see and smell bullshit when they hear it and see it. Also, I'd like to draw upon our governmental resources. The Federal Trade Commission should become involved with false advertising in the cases of the televangelism, who are on TV requesting donations to gain God's favor. This is something that they should be able to verify to substantiate their claims. Oh, okay. To substantiate their claims. Additionally, religion should be required to do the same to maintain their tax-exempt status. Which should only be authorized to those that have bona fide religions. Here's something I love. I don't think it's quite this high now, but the Roman Catholic Church, the last I heard, owns 168 million acres of land worldwide. This has been reduced, of course, because of the payouts and settlements that they have had to do over the years. If they were unable to provide this evidence of their deity's existence and have their tax-exempt status stripped, it would pretty much mean their extinction in this country. Okay. Okay, I'll finish up with this. I love this. This is an original. I mean, Freud thought that religion, he called it religion, the universal obsessional compulsion of humanity. I think this one's better. And it'd make a good bumper sticker. Religion is the accepted insanity and the plague that afflicts humanity. It is a multi-billion-dollar tax-exempt industry which peddles snake oil, which makes people stupid about reality. Thank you.
Thank you, Jerry. And I'm here to announce our final Freethinker of the Year awardee. I've had the pleasure of working with Marie Schaub for, it's 5 years now, as co-counsel on her monumental lawsuit against the Ten Commandments monument at the school that her daughter was set to attend. 5 years later, I'm proud to be awarding Marie the Freethinker of the Year award. She made it possible, despite hardship, as a local plaintiff, to proceed against Pennsylvania's New Kensington-Arnold School District. And what you may not know is sometimes as you proceed through a lawsuit, each side can request information from the other side. The school district requested extensive information from Marie, including any social media posts that she did on the subject of religion. If you're Facebook friends with Marie, you should know that this is thousands of posts. So we had to disclose literally thousands of pages of materials to the school district's attorneys. And it brings a smile to my face to think of them reviewing each of Marie's defenses of free thought and of religious endorsement within her community. Maybe even they learned something. 3 years after we filed the lawsuit, Marie's case was lost at the district level. The judge ruled that because she had refused to enroll her daughter in the high school, she and her daughter no longer had standing, which is, the legal right to challenge religious symbols, her legal right to challenge the religious symbols at that school. So having moved her daughter to actually a different school district, in fact, her standing was even stronger than somebody who had continued in the school system. We had appealed to the Third Circuit Court of Appeals, which oversees Pennsylvania cases, and they reversed course last year, ruling that she and her daughter both had standing to challenge this religious display. Marie, as the only publicly named plaintiff in the case, has been vilified in her community. Last year, she was honored with FFRF's Atheist and Foxhole Courage Award. And so after this Third Circuit ruling and after our convention last year, FFRF and our attorney, Mark Schneider, who also handled the case, were able to negotiate a victorious settlement. And in February of this year, and ultimately in March, the biblical monument was finally removed. So, Marie, we thank you for being a champion of the First Amendment, and please accept this plaque in honorarium.
Where does she want us to hold it up? I'll look over here. Thanks. I can kind of see. Thanks. All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here today. 2017 has not been a good year for controversial monuments. I'm sure you have all heard of the Christian man who ran over the Ten Commandments monolith in Arkansas, all while streaming live on Facebook. It was certainly entertaining to watch, and I wouldn't recommend it, but I was relieved to hear that it was not one of my fellow atheists. Confederate monuments have been dropping like Trump's approval ratings. Some have been toppled over, while others have been vandalized beyond repair. While I can appreciate their passion and understand their frustration, I think it is important to exhaust every legal avenue that is available before taking such drastic measures of civil disobedience. Believe me, there are many nights where I lay in bed and imagine wrapping a chain around that Judeo-Christian marker that sat outside my kid's public high school and yanking the damn thing out with my truck. But in doing so, it would not only hurt our cause by tarnishing our image, it would have probably ended up in jail time. This is the 6-foot-tall, 2,000-pound religious monument that has stood outside of my Valley High School unchallenged for over 60 years. The Decalogue was placed at the end of 2 main footpaths leading up to the front side of the building. Supposedly it was put there and many other places in order to promote a movie. A very similar monument at another nearby public school was recently ruled unconstitutional thanks to help from FFRF. It was relocated to private property. I remember the first time I saw the huge stone as a visitor at my child's karate event being held there in 2006. My main feeling was confusion, like how was this even possible? But I was also sickened by the feeling of helplessness. It wasn't until 2011 that my family and I transferred to the New Kensington-Arnold School District. We live in a small suburb of Pittsburgh in southwestern Pennsylvania. Where I'm from, there's a church on every other block. The tax base is low and the amount of senior citizens is high. But that didn't stop the district from trying to defend an unconstitutional, coercive message that negatively affected non-believers and people of other faiths. It was in 2012 that I first heard of a group known as the Freedom from Religion Foundation. Our local news station was discussing the disgusting monument that I had encountered several years before, and that's when it hit me. My daughter was in the middle school now, but eventually she would have to have that religious rock looming over her head on a daily basis. It was at that time that I filed my complaint, and the rest is history found in court records. After numerous depositions, continuations, and motions, the judge said that my daughter and I did not have standing because she had not been harmed enough, saying that our suit was premature. But that did not stop us. After some discussion, Patrick Elliott, who held my hand throughout the entire process, informed me that we were going back to court on appeal at my request. The panel of 3 judges unanimously agreed that the potential danger to my child was imminent and that I did have standing. At this time, I would like to personally thank Americans United for the Separation of Church and State, the Anti-Defamation League, the Central Conference of American Rabbis, the Jewish Social Policy Action Network, the Sikh Coalition, and the Union for Reform Judaism for filing a brief as Friends of the Court, and of course, the Freedom from Religion Foundation. Yes. Finally, after 5 long years, we did it. Full disclosure, this image may appear taller than it actually is. But I'm proud to be a part of such an important fight for the separation of state and church. After the case was moved back to the lower court, the school realized that they were going to lose. They agreed to move the monument and pay $164,000 in legal fees. But I'm sure that's only a fraction of what was spent over 5 years of litigation. As a plaintiff and a parent, it was never about the money. It is unfortunate that it took so many years that my daughter will finish her senior year elsewhere due to this interference. But when I drive by Valley High School, I think of that huge lesson the community learned and about the kids who will not have to walk in the shadow of its inappropriate message. Thanks. Well, our win did not go unnoticed. This is the view from my living room window of my neighbor's house directly across the street. All over southwestern PA, these cardboard cutouts are popping up in response to our victory. They do not realize that I support their rights to have whatever they want on their private property, and that every time I see it, it reminds me of our fight and our win. Apparently, my neighbors can erect a life-size crucifix, yet they cannot seem to put out one recycling bin. As you can see, I have received my fair share of crank mail. But as many negative messages I have received, I have gotten just as many, if not more, positive ones. Many people have since reached out to me to tell me that I have inspired them to speak out against inequality, and that is why I'm here today. I want to tell you to speak up for your rights and the rights of others, even if you don't always agree with them. As of today, the 1-ton granite slab is in storage at an unknown location. It was secretly removed overnight at the beginning of March of this year. Its new home will be at a Catholic school approximately 2 miles from its original placement. And even though the private school admits it needs a new roof, an updated gym, and funding for families, it started a GoFundMe campaign with a goal of $75,000 to relocate the monolith. They claim they wanted to use the money to place the donated monument on a foundation, and they want to buy a fancy new lighted sign to put up next to the 60-year-old stone. After falling short of their original goal, they lowered it to $25,000. At last check, they were up to almost $5,000. There has been no mention of where or when the Decalogue will be installed. I've recently really enjoyed being a small part of this great movement, and I hope to continue my involvement long after I'm forgotten. I was honored to speak at AHA this past March in Madison. I also spoke at CFI in Pittsburgh last June, and I look forward to seeing some of your faces in Philadelphia at PastaCon next month. Thank you, FFRF, for everything that you have done for me and my family, and all the hard work you do, and thank you so much to its members. Thank you for this awesome opportunity.